the 6th of December 1941, 150 miles east of Moscow. Captain Heinrich von Stahl pressed his gloved hand against the frozen turret of Panzer III. Number 427, watching a sight that turned his stomach to ice with calculated dread. 42 Panzer IIIs of the 4th Panzer Division stretched across the snow-choked road, engines coughing black smoke into the -37-degree air, their crews hammering at seized pistons with tools that shattered like glass in the cold. Behind him, the division's mechanics waited in tense silence. They had been trying to start the column for 6 hours, positioning fires under engine blocks for the dawn advance on Tula. The Panzer IIIs carried 120 rounds of 50mm ammunition each, enough to shatter a Soviet regiment in open combat. Von Stahl's mind raced through calculations. Fuel viscosity, battery charge, hydraulic pressure, track tension. He had learned armoured warfare under Guderian in France, where speed and shock combined to create the most feared panzer commander in Europe. Now, as battalion commander, von Stahl was proving he had inherited his mentor's audacity, but none of the weather's mercy. What the German High Command did not know, what their intelligence had failed to grasp despite Finnish warnings, was that Russian winter had evolved into something their doctrine could not counter. The Panzer IIIs were magnificent. The lubricants finally failed after years of temperate testing, and commanders like von Stahl had developed tactics that turned Panzer IIIs from breakthrough weapons into frozen statues. The mathematics of Germany's eastern defeat were being written not in sweeping encirclements, but in the silent depths where frost stalked steel prey. Panzer III No. 427's journey to this moment had begun 9 months earlier at the Daimler-Benz plant in Berlin-Marienfelde. Her chassis was rolled out on March 12, 1941, as Germany's industrial machine churned out medium tanks at a pace that would have seemed impossible just 2 years before. By April 30th, she left the factory. A Panzer III measuring 18 feet 1 inch in length, displacing 22 tons combat-loaded. The Panzer III represented the cutting edge of German medium tank design. Thicker 30mm frontal armor using face-hardened steel allowed it to withstand Soviet 76.2mm guns at ranges beyond 1,000 yards. This armor gave commanders like von Stahl a critical advantage. When 34 tanks appeared on the horizon, Panzer IIIs could engage from standoff distances, while their own 50mm Qui-39 guns penetrated Soviet armor at 1,500 yards. Earlier models carried only a 37mm gun, leaving them vulnerable to determined Soviet counterattacks. 5 road wheels per side with torsion bar suspension gave them excellent cross-country mobility. The interleaved wheel design, overlapping like shingles, distributed weight across soft ground and reduced ground pressure to 9 pounds per square inch. Each wheel carried a rubber tire for road march quietness. The tank mounted a Maybach HL 120 TRM 12-cylinder gasoline engine producing 300 horsepower. This power plant gave the Panzer III a road speed of 25 miles per hour and cross-country speed of 12. A 5-speed ZF transmission provided smooth shifting under combat conditions. The tank carried 92 gallons of 80-octane gasoline, enough for a road range of 90 miles or cross-country range of 55. This combination of armor, firepower, and mobility made the Panzer III the perfect weapon for strangling Soviet supply lines in the vast Russian plains. The story of the Panzer III begins not in Berlin, but in the drawing rooms of the Heereswaffenamt in 1934. German generals, scarred by the mud of Verdun and the trenches of Flanders, demanded a tank that could restore mobility to warfare. The specification called for a 20-ton vehicle with a high-velocity 50mm gun, capable of defeating any armoured opponent at 1,000 yards. Daimler-Benz won the contract with a prototype that featured torsion bar suspension, a revolutionary system borrowed from Czech engineer Ferdinand Porsche, who had tested it on agricultural tractors. Torsion bars, steel rods twisted inside tubes, offered superior wheel travel compared to leaf springs, allowing the tank to glide over obstacles at speeds that would shatter older designs. The interleaved road wheels, another Porsche innovation, spread the tank's weight across a wider footprint, reducing the risk of bogging in soft soil. On paper, it was perfection. In the proving grounds of Kummersdorf, Panzer IIIs danced through obstacle courses, their Maybach engines singing at 3,000 revolutions per minute, tracks biting into gravel with authority. No one tested them below 0 degrees Celsius, no one thought to. By 1939, the Panzer III formed the backbone of Germany's panzer divisions. Each battalion fielded 50 to 70 tanks, organized into companies of 17 with a command vehicle. Crews trained at the Panzertruppenschule in Winsdorf, learning to fight as a cohesive unit driver, gunner, loader, radio operator, commander, each man a specialist in his role. The commander stood in the turret, periscopes giving him 360-degree vision, his throat microphone linked to the company net. The gunner sat below and to the right, his Zeiss TZF-5 telescopic sight magnifying targets at 6 power. The loader, muscles honed by months of drill, could slam a 50mm round into the breech in under 4 seconds. The driver, fingers frozen even in summer, wrestled 30 tons of steel with clutch and brake pedals that required 40 pounds of pressure. The radio operator hunched over the Fug 5 transceiver, its 30-watt signal reaching 20 kilometers on voice. Together, they were a symphony of destruction until the cold silenced them. On June 22, 1941, 4th Panzer Division crossed the Bug River with 312 tanks, including 144 Panzer IIIs. Von Stahl's battalion led the spearhead toward Minsk. The first test came on June 27th. His company tracked a Soviet column of 40 BT-7 light tanks, escorted by 20 trucks. As they closed for attack, a BT-7 suddenly appeared at 2,000 yards and closing fast. Von Stahl ordered his driver deep into a wheat field. 3 Soviet shells exploded nearby, rattling the turret, but causing no penetration. When the BT departed, von Stahl returned to firing position and resumed the attack. At 1,200 yards range, he fired 3 50mm rounds. 2 struck the BT-7 amidships. The 10-ton tank burned in minutes. 5 days later, von Stahl caught another Soviet column in darkness. He maneuvered his Panzer III to within 800 yards and fired a perfect burst. The 50mm shells slammed into a 26, tearing the tank apart in a series of explosions. Survivors later reported that the tank's ammunition had detonated, magnifying the shell damage. By the end of July, von Stahl's battalion had fired 3,000 rounds and scored hits on 160 of them. They were credited with destroying 87 Soviet tanks, totaling approximately 2,000 tons of steel. The Wehrmacht awarded the battalion the Eastern Front clasp, a distinction earned only by units that destroyed at least 50 enemy vehicles. The advance continued through August and September, a blur of dust and victory. Panzer IIIs sliced through Soviet defenses like a hot knife through butter. At Smolensk in July, von Stahl's company encircled a Soviet motorized brigade, destroying 45 trucks and 26 tanks in a single afternoon. The crews grew cocky, painting kill rings on their gun barrels, 1 ring per tank, 2 for trucks. Maintenance was minimal. The Maybach engines ran flawlessly in the summer heat, oil pressure steady at 50 pounds per square inch, coolant temperature never exceeding 190 degrees Fahrenheit. Fuel consumption averaged 1 gallon per mile on roads, 2 in fields well within the 92-gallon capacity. Tracks lasted 1,000 miles before replacement, rubber pads still intact. The interleaved wheels, packed with dust, shed it naturally during movement. No one noticed the first signs of trouble. A slight stiffness in the suspension after rain, a faint grinding when turning sharply. Russia was vast, the enemy endless, but the Panzer III was invincible. Then came October. On the 6th, the temperature dropped to -4 degrees Celsius overnight, the first hard freeze in living memory for many crews. Von Stahl's Panzer III No. 427 started reluctantly that morning, the Maybach turning over only after 30 minutes of preheating with blowtorches scavenged from a field kitchen. The engine oil, a standard SAE 30 grade developed for Central European summers, had thickened to the consistency of tar. What had been a smooth idle at 700 revolutions per minute now strained at 400, the starter motor groaning under the load. Mechanics poured hot water over the fuel lines, but the 80-octane gasoline had absorbed atmospheric moisture during the warm autumn, forming ice crystals that clogged the carburetor jets. By October 15th, when the mercury hit -10 degrees, the problems escalated. Water trapped in the cooling system, a closed loop of pipes and radiator meant to keep the Maybach at 180 degrees Fahrenheit, froze solid, expanding by 9% and splitting radiator, and seams like overripe fruit. One Panzer III in the neighbouring company lost its entire coolant in a geyser of steam and ice, the engine seizing after 5 minutes of running. The crew abandoned it, taking only their machine pistols and a loaf of frozen bread. The Rasputitsa arrived in full fury by late October, turning roads into quagmires and fields into lakes. Panzer IIIs, designed for firm ground, sank to their bellies in mud. The interleaved wheels, genius on pavement, became tombs. Mud packed into every gap, hardening as temperatures fell. A single Panzer III could accumulate 1,000 pounds of clay between its wheels, increasing track tension beyond design limits. Pins sheared, return rollers cracked, and the entire suspension locked rigid. Crews worked through the night with shovels and crowbars, faces black with exhaustion and grease. One driver, 19-year-old Fritz Müller, lost 3 fingers to frostbite when his glove froze to a track pin. The division's advance slowed to a crawl, 10 miles per day becoming a triumph. Supply trucks, mostly Opel Blitz 3-tonners with summer tires, slid off roads and overturned. Fuel arrived late, ammunition not at all. The Panzer III, built for speed, became a prisoner of the earth. November brought snow, and with it, a new kind of hell. On the 3rd, the temperature plummeted to -20 degrees Celsius. Von Stahl's battalion, tasked with securing a bridgehead over the Lama River, found half its Panzer IIIs immobile before dawn. The Maybach engines, liquid-cooled and dependent on radiators, froze solid overnight. Crews lit fires under the engine decks, using precious gasoline and wooden crates. The heat cracked cylinder heads, warped pistons, and still the engines refused to turn. Batteries, lead-acid cells rated for 15 degrees Celsius, delivered less than 20% capacity. Starter motors whined futilely, draining what little charge remained. Hydraulic fluid in the turret, traverse system thickened to glue, locking guns in place. One Panzer III, attempting a dawn patrol, managed to move 50 yards before its tracks seized, ice packing the sprockets solid. The crew abandoned it, taking only their personal weapons and a single can of tinned beef. The tracks were the true betrayers. The Panzer III rolled on 16 interleaved road wheels per side, a design triumph on the paved roads of France, where it reduced vibration and extended rubber tire life. In Russia, those same wheels became death traps. Snow filled every crevice, freezing into a solid mass that added 300 pounds per side. The rubber return rollers, meant to guide the track, cracked from thermal shock when crews lit fires beneath the suspension to free frozen bogies. One night outside Kalinin, von Stahl watched as a Panzer III's track snapped clean during a dawn start, the steel pins brittle as chalk at -20 degrees. The crew spent 4 hours replacing it with numb fingers, only for the new track to seize solid by evening. The division's mechanics, trained in Berlin garages, had no experience with such conditions. They improvised with axes and blowtorches, cutting away ice only for it to reform within hours. Spare parts, meant to arrive by rail, were stuck in Warsaw, the trains frozen to the tracks. Picture this: November 29th, 1941, 50 miles west of Moscow. The temperature is -35 degrees, the coldest November day in 140 years of record-keeping. General Hübner's 4th Panzer Group, once a juggernaut of 800 tanks, fields fewer than 150 runners. Von Stahl's battalion is down to 21 Panzer III's operational. His own No. 427 sits immobile, its battery delivering no cranking power, its engine a block of ice. The crew huddles inside, burning ammunition boxes for warmth, their breath fogging the periscopes. They share a single candle, its flame guttering in the draught from a cracked vision slit. Outside, the wind howls at 40 miles per hour, driving snow through every seam. The radio is dead, its tubes too cold to function. The turret, manually traversed in summer, now requires 2 men and a crowbar to move 10 degrees. Ammunition, stored in the hull, is too cold to load. The brass casings contract, jamming in the breech. The Panzer III, pride of the Wehrmacht, has become a frozen coffin. The German High Command, safe in East Prussia, refused to believe the reports. Hitler, poring over maps in the Wolf's Lair, dismissed the winter as a temporary inconvenience. His quartermasters, fixated on ammunition and fuel, allocated zero production capacity to winter lubricants or engine heaters in the 1941 build plan. By the time OKW issued emergency directives in November, calling for wood-fired preheating and synthetic oil substitution, the factories were 3,000 miles away, and the supply lines stretched across a continent of mud and ice. Over 1,000 German vehicles were abandoned that winter, not to combat, but to frost. Panzer III's froze solid, their gun breeches iced shut, hydraulic fluid turned to glue, ammunition propellant too cold to ignite properly. One after another, the tanks that had conquered Europe became white sarcophagi, their crews marching west on feet wrapped in newspaper, whispering of a front that devoured steel. The human cost was staggering. Frostbite claimed more victims than Soviet bullets. Crews, issued only summer uniforms, wrapped themselves in captured Soviet greatcoats and blankets stolen from peasant huts. Fingers blackened and fell off, toes turned gangrenous. One driver, attempting to start his Panzer III, poured gasoline directly into the carburetor. The backfire ignited his clothing, burning him alive inside the turret. Another crew, trapped in a frozen tank for 3 days, resorted to eating their leather belts boiled in snow. The division's field hospital, a converted schoolhouse in Ridgev, overflowed with amputees. Morphine ran out by December, leaving surgeons to operate with vodka and hacksaws. Von Stahl himself lost 2 toes to frostbite, the blackened digits snapping off like icicles when he removed his boots. The Soviet counteroffensive began on December 5, 1941. Fresh Siberian divisions, equipped with 34 tanks and wide tracks, attacked through blizzards that grounded the Luftwaffe. German Panzer III's, frozen in place, became sitting ducks. At Didovo, a single 34 destroyed 5 Panzer III's in 10 minutes, its 85mm gun firing from beyond visual range. The German crews, unable to traverse their turrets, could only watch as shells punched through their armour. By December 15th, 4th Panzer Division had lost 210 tanks, 180 to cold, 30 to combat. The survivors retreated, abandoning equipment, burning supply, dumps to deny them to the enemy. Von Stahl's No. 427 was blown up with a grenade to prevent capture, its frozen hulk a monument to hubris. This was not misfortune. It was systemic failure. The Panzer III's design, optimized for temperate climates, betrayed it in sub-zero conditions. The Maybach engine, liquid-cooled for efficiency, required a radiator vulnerable to ice. The interleaved wheels, brilliant for weight distribution, collected debris like a magnet. The lubricants, developed for summer campaigns, solidified at temperatures common in Russian winters. The German army, built for short, decisive campaigns, had no doctrine for prolonged operations in extreme cold. Training emphasized speed and aggression, not survival. Maintenance was delegated to rear area workshops, not field crews. Supply chains assumed railheads within 100 miles, not 1,000. Every assumption collapsed under the weight of Russian winter. Now pivot westward, across the Atlantic, where shipyards thunder like perpetual storms. It is December 1942, and the same frozen hell greets American tanks, but they do not falter. Enter the M4 Sherman, a Detroit workhorse born in the drafting rooms of the Lima Locomotive Works, where the only snow falls on assembly line roofs. When the first Lend-Lease Shermans roll off Arctic convoys into Murmansk in October 1942, 11,000 strong by war's end, they are not just tanks, they are a revelation. Because American engineers, haunted by Finland's winter war and the Wehrmacht's early stumbles, built for the apocalypse, not the parade ground. The Sherman story begins in 1940, when the U.S. Army Ordnance Department issued specifications for a medium tank to replace the M3 Lee. The requirements were simple: reliability, ease of production, and adaptability to any climate. The design team, led by engineers from the Rock Island Arsenal, studied captured German Panzer IIIs in North Africa and rejected the interleaved wheel system outright. Too complex, too prone to fouling, wrote Colonel John Christmas in his report. Instead, they chose vertical volute spring suspension, 6 road wheels per side, rubber bushed, and space to shed debris naturally. The tracks, T41 pattern with molded rubber chevrons, gripped ice like crampons. The power plant was the key. The Wright R975 radial engine, a 9-cylinder air-cooled giant producing 400 horsepower. Borrowed from bombers and crop dusters, it eliminated the radiator entirely. No coolant meant no freezing. Air flowed through finned cylinders, maintaining temperature regardless of ambient conditions. The Sherman's development was a masterpiece of American industrial pragmatism. Prototypes were tested at Aberdeen Proving Ground in refrigerated chambers, simulating -50 degrees Fahrenheit. Engines started after 24 hours of exposure. Tracks shed snow without packing. Hydraulic fluid, a special glycol mix, remained liquid at -60. Batteries, insulated in asbestos-lined boxes, retained 80% charge. Fuel, 100-octane aviation gasoline, arrived bone-dry from refineries using molecular sieves to remove water. The tank's armor, 75 mm at the front, was sloped for deflection, but the real protection was mobility. At 30 tons, the Sherman was lighter than the Panzer III on a per-square-inch basis, its wide tracks reducing ground pressure to 7 pounds per square inch. It floated over snow where German tanks sank. Production began in February 1942 at the Lima Locomotive Works, the Fisher Tank Arsenal, and the Pacific Car and Foundry Company. By June, 100 Shermans rolled off the lines daily. Each tank was identical, built to tolerances that allowed parts interchangeability across factories. Crew training emphasized simplicity. The driver had a synchro mesh, transmission requiring half the effort of the Panzer III's crash gearbox. The gunner used a gyro-stabilized 75 mm M3 gun, accurate on the move. The loader handled separate loading ammunition, faster than the Panzer III's one-piece rounds. The commander had a periscopic sight and a .50 caliber machine gun for air defense. The radio operator operated an SCR-508 set with a range of 20 miles. Every component was designed for field maintenance with basic tools. The first Shermans arrived in Russia via the Arctic convoys' perilous runs past Norway's fjords, where U-boats and Luftwaffe bombers sank one ship in 3. PQ-18, in September 1942, lost 13 of 39 merchantmen, but the surviving vessels delivered 200 Shermans to Archangel. Soviet crews, trained by American instructors in Murmansk, marveled at the tank's cold start reliability. A Sherman could sit for a week at -40 degrees and start on the first crank. The radial engine's preheat plugs, powered by a wind-up generator, warmed the cylinders in 10 minutes. Canvas engine covers trapped body heat from the crew. Insulated fuel drums doubled as foot warmers. The tanks came with winter kits: glycol antifreeze, ANG3 grease, asbestos battery blankets, and even portable heaters powered by the tank's electrical system. The contrast with German Panzer III's was stark. On January 15, 1943, outside Stalingrad, a Soviet brigade with 30 Shermans encountered a German counterattack of 40 Panzer III's. The temperature was -32 degrees. The Panzer III's, preheated for hours with fires, managed to start 20 vehicles. The Shermans started all 30 on the first attempt. The battle lasted 40 minutes. The Shermans, mobile and warm, outmaneuvered the sluggish Panzer III's, their 75mm guns punching through German armor at 1,000 yards. 15 Panzer III's were destroyed, 10 abandoned due to mechanical failure. The Shermans lost 3 tanks, all to combat, none to cold. The Sherman's air-cooled radial was the masterstroke. Liquid cooling demanded radiators, vulnerable to ice and battle damage. The right engine, spinning at 2,400 revolutions per minute, generated its own heat, warming the fighting compartment to shirt-sleeve temperatures. German crews burned newspapers inside Panzer III's. American crews brewed coffee on exhaust manifolds. The Sherman's vertical volute springs absorbed shocks that would shatter torsion bars. Its tracks, with rubber blocks, flexed instead of cracking. Its hydraulic system used fluid that stayed liquid at -60. Even the gun recoil system, spring-based, was immune to temperature changes. By Kursk, in July 1943, the Sherman formed the backbone of Soviet reserve brigades. At Prokhorovka, the largest tank battle in history, 600 Shermans and 34s faced 800 German tanks, including 150 Tigers and Panzer IVs. The temperature was +30 degrees Celsius, but the lessons of winter held. Shermans, maintained in field workshops with American parts, achieved 95% availability. German tanks, plagued by summer dust in winter-designed modifications, managed 70%. The Soviets lost 400 tanks, the Germans 600. The Sherman's reliability allowed sustained operations. German tanks broke down faster than they could be repaired. The mathematics were merciless. Germany built 5,400 Panzer III's total. America produced 49,000 Shermans. Each American tank arrived with cold-weather manuals translated into Russian, diagrams simple enough for peasant mechanics. German manuals assumed temperate conditions. Field modifications were improvised desperation. The U.S. Army lost fewer than 2,000 Shermans to cold across the Selve. Tire war. Germany lost 400,000 vehicles to winter 1941 to 1942 alone. The human element sealed the verdict. American crews, rotated every 6 months, trained in stateside winters. Soviet crews, adopting American methods, achieved proficiency in weeks. German crews, conscripted from occupied territories, lacked experience and motivation. Spare parts for Shermans arrived by convoy. One Sherman completed a 200-mile road march in -25 degrees. Its German counterpart would have frozen solid after 20. On April 12, 1945, outside Berlin, a Sherman crew veterans of the Bulge winter watched an abandoned Panzer III, its crew long fled. The temperature was -5 degrees. The Americans started their M4 on the first try, drove past the frozen German hulk, and continued the advance. The Panzer III's interleaved wheels were packed solid with ice, its Maybach silent, its legacy sealed in frost. The Sherman's design philosophy, simplicity, reliability, adaptability triumphed where German complexity failed. The interleaved wheels, meant to distribute weight, collected ice. The liquid-cooled engine, efficient in summer, froze in winter. The lubricants, optimized for temperate climates, solidified at -15. The Sherman's air-cooled radial, wide tracks, and winterized systems shrugged off the cold. American industry, producing one tank every 7 minutes, overwhelmed German craftsmanship. The mathematics of survival were written in Detroit's factories, tested in Alaska's tundra, proven on Russia's steppes. German Panzer III's froze because they were built for a different war. American Shermans rolled because they were built for this one.